Minjun stood at the entrance of his new shop, hands trembling, staring at the small crowd gathering outside. 6 months ago, he would have laughed if someone told him this would be his life. 6 months ago, he was a different man entirely. And it all started with a cup of spilled coffee and a stranger's sharp tongue. He took a breath, looked at the banner above the door with his name on it, and whispered to himself, if someone told me one stupid argument over coffee would change my entire future, I would have laughed in their face. Then the doors opened, and the past came rushing back. Before any of this began, Minjun's life was something else entirely. Before all of this happened, may the same God who orchestrates every small moment into something beautiful bless you as you watch this story. May He turn your struggles into testimonies and your waiting into greatness, in Jesus' name. If you believe in that kind of blessing, type Amen in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button before we continue, because this story is about to take you somewhere you won't expect. Now, back to 6 months earlier. Minjun was 29 years old, and his life ran like a machine. Wake up at 6. Gym by 6:30. Office by 8. Lunch at exactly 12:30. Home by 7. Sleep by 11. Repeat. He worked at a mid-sized finance firm in Seoul, and everyone around him believed he was destined for greatness. His parents believed it. His manager believed it. Even Minjun believed it, though if anyone had asked him whether he was happy, he wouldn't have known how to answer. Happiness wasn't part of the plan. Success was. He had a promotion interview coming in 3 weeks, the kind of promotion that would set him up for the rest of his career. His parents had already started telling relatives about it. His coworkers treated him with a quiet respect reserved for people who were clearly going places. But underneath all of that order, something in Minjun had gone numb. He didn't notice it. He didn't have time to notice it. Every day looked like the day before, and every day, he told himself that this was simply what a good life looked like. That morning, the rain came down harder than usual. Minjun stepped into his favorite cafe near the office, shaking water off his umbrella, already running through his schedule in his head. Meeting at 9. Call with the client at 11. Documents due by 3. The cafe was packed. People crowded near the counter, voices overlapping, the smell of wet coats mixing with the smell of roasted coffee. Minjun pushed forward gently, trying not to lose his place in line, his mind still on his meeting. That was when it happened. A woman, distracted, reaching for her phone while balancing a tray, bumped into him hard enough that his coffee tipped and spilled across his sleeve, the heat biting into his skin even through the fabric. Minjun jumped back, shaking his arm. The woman turned quickly. She was around 26, dark skin, sharp eyes, hair pulled back in a way that suggested she didn't have time for nonsense. Her name, though he didn't know it yet, was Adiz. I'm sorry, she said quickly, reaching for a napkin. But Minjun, irritated, soaked, and already late, wasn't in the mood for grace. Seriously, he snapped. Some people should pay attention to where they're walking. Adiz's expression shifted instantly from apologetic to defensive. I said I was sorry. It's a small accident. It's a hot drink on my sleeve before an important meeting, Minjun shot back. Some people should pay attention to where they're walking, he repeated, sharper this time. And maybe, Adiz said, voice rising, you shouldn't act like coffee on your sleeve is the end of the world. It's not like I poured it on your laptop. A few people nearby turned to look. Minjun felt his face heat up, partly from embarrassment, partly from anger. You don't even know what kind of day I'm having, he said. And you don't know what kind of day I'm having either, Adiz replied. But I still apologized. You're the one making a scene. Minjun opened his mouth to respond, then stopped himself. He looked around at the staring faces, exhaled sharply, grabbed a napkin, and walked away without another word. Adiz rolled her eyes, gathered her things, and walked toward a table near the window, clearly still annoyed. They didn't speak again. Minjun left the cafe a few minutes later, his sleeve still damp, his mood ruined for the rest of the morning. He thought that was the end of it. Just a stranger, an accident, an argument that would be forgotten by lunch. He was wrong. As he stepped outside, he noticed something on the bench near the door. A small worn notebook, its cover slightly curling at the edges, clearly used often. He looked around. The woman from the argument was already gone, swallowed by the crowd and the rain. Minjun stared at the notebook for a long moment. Normally, he would have left it. Normally, he didn't have time to deal with other people's things, especially someone who had just argued with him. But curiosity tugged at him. He picked it up, slipping it into his bag without fully deciding to keep it, telling himself he would simply hand it to the cafe staff. But he didn't. He carried it with him to work, and during a quiet moment between meetings, he opened it. Inside were sketches, project ideas, notes about community storytelling events, rejected proposals with comments scribbled in the margins, criticism written in someone else's handwriting, replies written in hers, defiant and unwilling to give up. Near the middle of the notebook, one sentence stopped him completely. If life never surprises you anymore, maybe you stopped living. Minjun stared at the words for a long time. He didn't know why they affected him the way they did. He had a stable job, a clear path, a future others envied. Yet something about that sentence felt like it was speaking directly to him. He closed the notebook, but the sentence stayed with him for the rest of the day, repeating itself quietly in the back of his mind during his meetings, during his commute home, even as he lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling. The next morning, Minjun made a decision that surprised even himself. He would return the notebook. It wasn't easy. He didn't know her name, only that she frequented the cafe. He went back during his lunch break, then again the next day, asking the staff if they recognized the description he gave. Most shook their heads. One barista vaguely remembered her, said she sometimes came in with a laptop covered in stickers, but didn't know her name either. For 3 days, Minjun visited the cafe during every spare moment, scanning faces, feeling increasingly foolish. His coworkers asked why he kept disappearing during lunch. He gave vague answers. On the 4th day, he saw her. She was sitting near the window again, laptop open, headphones in, clearly focused on something important. Minjun hesitated by the door, his heart oddly nervous for something so simple. He almost turned around. Instead, he walked over and set the notebook gently on her table. Adiz looked up, startled, then recognized him immediately. Her expression flickered between surprise and wariness. "You," she said. "You forgot this," Minjun said simply, gesturing to the notebook. She stared at it, then at him, clearly trying to figure out his angle. "I've been looking for that everywhere." "I figured," he said. "I would have returned it sooner, but I didn't know your name." She picked up the notebook, flipping through it quickly as if checking that everything was still there. When she looked up again, some of the defensiveness had faded from her eyes. "Did you read it?" she asked. Minjun hesitated. "Some of it." "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." He expected her to be angry. Instead, she studied him for a moment, then asked, "What did you think?" The question caught him off guard. "Honestly? I don't really know. But there was one line that stuck with me." "Which one?" He repeated it quietly. "If life never surprises you anymore, maybe you stopped living." Adiz's expression softened slightly. "That one's important to me." There was a brief, awkward silence between them, the memory of their argument still hanging in the air. "I'm Minjun," he said finally. "Adiz," she replied. Neither of them apologized for the argument. But something had shifted, just slightly, the tension replaced by something more curious. "Thank you for bringing it back," Adiz said. "Most people would have just left it." "I almost did," Minjun admitted. She almost smiled. "Honest, at least." He nodded awkwardly, unsure what else to say, then turned to leave. "Wait," Adiz said suddenly. He turned back. "You don't strike me as the type who chases down strangers to return notebooks," she said. "What made you do it?" Minjun thought about it for a moment. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Maybe I needed a surprise." For the first time since they met, Adiz actually smiled. That should have been the end of it. A returned notebook, a brief exchange, a closed chapter. But life, it seemed, had other plans. Over the following weeks, Minjun found himself returning to that same cafe more often than necessary. He told himself it was because the coffee was good, that it was convenient, that it had nothing to do with the woman who occasionally sat by the window with her laptop covered in stickers. He was lying to himself, and somewhere deep down, he knew it. Their conversations started small. A nod of recognition. A brief comment about the weather. Then longer exchanges about her project, about his work, about nothing in particular. Minjun learned that Adiz had moved to Seoul 2 years earlier, chasing an opportunity to develop community storytelling projects, the kind of work that paid little but meant everything to her. She had grown up watching her grandmother tell stories that brought entire neighborhoods together, and she wanted to recreate that magic in new ways. "Most people think I'm wasting my life," she told him one afternoon. "Chasing something that doesn't pay well, moving across the world for an idea that might not work." "Does it bother you?" Minjun asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I'd rather fail doing something that matters to me than succeed doing something that doesn't." Minjun didn't respond right away. The words sat uncomfortably close to something he had never allowed himself to consider about his own life. Adiz, for her part, learned that Minjun's life ran like clockwork, that he had a promotion coming, that his family had specific expectations for who he should become. "Do you actually want the promotion?" she asked him once. "Of course," he said quickly. Too quickly. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. Their personalities clashed constantly. Minjun was cautious, calculated, uncomfortable with anything unplanned. Adiz was bold, instinctive, willing to leap before she had every detail figured out. They argued about small things. Whether spontaneity was reckless or freeing. Whether stability was safety or a cage. Whether ambition without purpose meant anything at all. But somehow, the arguments never pushed them apart. If anything, they pulled them closer, each conversation peeling back another layer of who they really were beneath the surfaces they showed the world. One evening, Adiz invited him to help with a small cultural event she was organizing, a gathering meant to bring together people from different backgrounds through food, music, and storytelling. "I don't know anything about organizing events," Minjun said. "You don't need to know anything," she replied. "You just need to show up." Reluctantly, he agreed. The event was chaotic in ways Minjun wasn't used to. Things went wrong constantly: a missing speaker system, a vendor who arrived late, rain threatening to ruin everything at the last minute. Minjun found himself running between tasks, solving problems on the fly, something his structured mind would normally have hated. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he laughed freely. He met strangers who shared stories about their lives, their struggles, their joys. He felt useful in a way that had nothing to do with spreadsheets or promotions. Late that night, as they cleaned up the venue together, Adiz turned to him. "When was the last time you did something that wasn't planned?" she asked. Minjun opened his mouth to answer, then realized he didn't have one. He stood there in silence, the question hanging heavily between them. Adiz didn't push further. She simply smiled softly and continued cleaning, leaving him alone with a question he couldn't shake for days afterward. Weeks passed. Minjun's promotion interview arrived, and he performed exactly as expected, confident, prepared, impressive. A week later, he received the news. He got the promotion. His parents were overjoyed. His coworkers congratulated him with genuine admiration. Everyone around him celebrated as though he had reached the pinnacle of success. But that night, sitting alone in his apartment, staring at the promotion letter on his desk, Minjun felt nothing but emptiness. He should have been thrilled. Instead, his old life, the one he had worked so hard to build, suddenly felt unbearably small. He thought about calling Adiz to share the news, then hesitated, unsure why the thought of telling her felt more complicated than telling his own parents. The next day, when he finally saw her at the cafe, something seemed off. Adiz was unusually quiet, her usual energy replaced by a tension Minjun hadn't seen before. "What's wrong?" he asked. She hesitated, then finally spoke. "I have something to tell you." Minjun's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "I applied for an international storytelling fellowship a few months ago," she said. "Before I even met you. It's a huge opportunity, the kind that could change everything for my work." "Okay," Minjun said slowly. "That's incredible." I got accepted, Adiz continued, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. Minjun felt something twist inside him, though he couldn't immediately identify what. That's amazing, Adiz. Congratulations. I leave in 1 week, she said quietly. The words hit him like a wave he hadn't seen coming. 1 week. It's based overseas, she said. It's a 2-year program. I've wanted something like this for years. Minjun sat in stunned silence, the implications slowly settling over him. In the months they had known each other, he had never once imagined that she might leave, that this strange, unexpected friendship that had reshaped so much of his thinking might simply end. You're really leaving, he said finally, almost to himself. I have to, Adiz said. This is everything I've worked for. Something inside Minjun, frustration, fear, confusion all tangled together, rose to the surface before he could stop it. So that's it, he said, his voice sharper than he intended. You spend months changing how people think, pulling them into your world, and then you just disappear? Adiz's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. You heard me, Minjun said, standing now, his composure slipping. You made me question everything about my life, and now you're just leaving like none of this mattered? That's not fair, Adiz said, her voice rising to match his. I never asked you to question your life. You did that yourself. Because of you. Minjun shot back. No, Adiz said firmly, stepping closer, her own frustration breaking through. You were never changing for me, Minjun. You were becoming yourself. Don't put that on me like it's some kind of debt I owe you. Her words struck harder than anything he expected, the truth in them cutting through his anger and leaving something far more painful in its place. I thought, he started, then stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. You thought what? Adiz pressed, her voice softer now, though still strained. That I would stay because of an argument over spilled coffee? Because we became friends? My life doesn't pause for anyone, Minjun. Not even for someone I care about. Silence stretched between them, heavy and unbearable. I care about you too, Minjun finally said quietly. More than I expected to. Adiz's expression flickered with something vulnerable, but she shook her head slowly. Then let that mean something other than asking me to stay small for your comfort. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, the weight of everything crashing down at once. This argument hurt far more than their first. For the next few days, Minjun barely spoke to anyone. He went through the motions of his promoted position, attending meetings, signing documents, accepting congratulations he no longer felt he deserved. His mind kept circling back to Adiz's words, to the truth buried beneath her anger. One night, unable to sleep, he found the notebook again, the one she had given him weeks earlier as a gift after their friendship deepened, a smaller second notebook meant just for him. He flipped through pages of his own scattered thoughts, things he had written down during their conversations, fragments of ideas about a life beyond spreadsheets and promotions. Near the back, tucked into a page he barely remembered writing on, was a note in her handwriting, added without his noticing. The right people don't give you answers. They make you ask better questions. Minjun stared at the words for a long time, the weight of them settling deep into his chest. He thought about his promotion, the career path laid out perfectly before him, the life everyone expected him to live. He thought about the years stretching ahead, predictable and safe, the same routine repeating itself until he became an old man who never once asked himself if he was truly happy. Then he thought about the cultural event, the laughter, the chaos, the feeling of being alive in a way spreadsheets never gave him. He thought about an old, abandoned idea he had buried years ago, a small project he once dreamed of building before responsibility convinced him to set it aside. For the first time in years, Minjun allowed himself to imagine a different future, one he hadn't planned, one that terrified him completely. The next morning, he walked into his manager's office and resigned from the position he had worked so hard to earn. His manager stared at him in disbelief. You just got promoted. Are you sure about this? No, Minjun admitted. But I'm sure I need to try. His parents were furious when he told them. They couldn't understand why he would throw away everything he had built for an uncertain idea with no guarantees. You're making a mistake, his father said. Maybe, Minjun replied. But it's mine to make. He used his savings to revive the project he had abandoned years earlier, a small platform meant to connect local communities through shared stories and events, inspired in no small part by the very things Adiz had shown him. The early months were brutal. He failed more than he succeeded. He doubted himself constantly, especially during sleepless nights when his old comfortable life seemed to call him back. There were days he nearly gave up entirely, staring at empty bank statements and unanswered emails, wondering if he had thrown away everything for nothing. But slowly, painfully, something began to take shape. A handful of people joined his platform. Small events started happening, communities connecting in ways they hadn't before. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't profitable, not yet. But for the first time in his adult life, Minjun felt genuinely alive. He thought about Adiz often during those months, wondering where she was, what she was doing, whether she ever thought about him the way he thought about her. He never reached out, partly out of pride, partly out of fear that doing so would somehow undo the growth he had fought so hard to build. Months turned into nearly half a year. Minjun's small project slowly grew into something real, something people genuinely valued. He rented a small space for a physical gathering point, something between an event space and community center, and prepared for its official opening. That brings us back to where this story began. Minjun stood at the entrance of his new shop, hands trembling, staring at the small crowd gathering outside. The banner above the door read the name of his project, the very idea he had once buried beneath years of caution and routine. He thought about everything that had brought him here. The argument, the notebook, the friendship, the heartbreak, the decision that terrified him more than anything else he had ever done. The doors opened, and people began to file inside, curious about the new space, drawn by word of mouth from the small community he had built. Minjun greeted them, shook hands, answered questions, his earlier nervousness slowly giving way to quiet pride. Then, near the back of the gathering crowd, someone walked through the door who made his entire body go still. Adiz. She looked the same, yet somehow different, more confident, more sure of herself, carrying an energy that immediately filled the room the way it always had. Minjun stood frozen, unsure if he was imagining things. She walked toward him slowly, her familiar smile spreading across her face as she took in the space around her. So, she said, stopping in front of him. Still think arguments ruin your day? Minjun felt a wave of emotion rise in his chest, relief, joy, disbelief all tangled together. He smiled despite himself. No, he said simply. She tilted her head slightly, waiting. They just don't warn you, he continued, his voice steady despite everything he was feeling, when they're about to change your future. Adiz laughed softly, the sound warming something in him that had been cold for months. I came back early, she admitted. The program ended a few weeks ago. I heard about this place through some old contacts here. I didn't expect it to be yours. I didn't expect you to walk through that door, Minjun replied honestly. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the noise of the gathering crowd, the weight of everything they had been through settling comfortably between them instead of pulling them apart. I'm proud of you, Adiz said quietly. For choosing this. I wouldn't have chosen it without you, Minjun admitted. Don't give me that, she said, though her smile softened the words. You did this yourself. He shook his head slightly. Maybe. But you're the one who taught me that surprises are sometimes exactly what life needs. Adiz looked around at the space, at the community he had built from nothing but an abandoned dream and a difficult decision. It's beautiful, Minjun, really. Stay, he said suddenly, the word leaving his mouth before he could stop it. She looked at him, surprised. Not forever if you don't want to, he clarified quickly. Just for now. Help me build this further. You know more about this than I ever will. Adiz considered him for a long moment, the same calculating look she had given him the very first day they exchanged words over spilled coffee. On one condition, she said finally. What's that? Next time, you handle the unexpected emergencies, she said, a teasing smile spreading across her face. I'm tired of being the one who fixes everything. Minjun laughed, the sound full and genuine in a way it hadn't been in years. Deal. As the evening continued, more people arrived, filling the space with conversation, laughter, and the kind of energy Minjun had once believed only existed in other people's lives. He moved through the crowd, introducing Adiz to community members, listening as she immediately began offering ideas to improve future events, falling back into her element effortlessly. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, Minjun and Adiz sat together near the entrance, looking out at the quiet street outside. "Do you regret it?" Adiz asked. "Leaving everything behind?" Minjun thought about the question carefully before answering. "There were nights I regretted it completely. Nights I thought I had ruined my entire future for nothing. And now?" He looked around at the space they sat in, the small but meaningful thing he had built from nothing but a buried dream and a painful decision. "Now I think the only thing I would have regretted is never trying at all." Adiz smiled, satisfied with his answer. "You know," Minjun said after a moment, "none of this would have happened if you hadn't spilled that coffee on me." "Excuse me," Adiz said, feigning offense. "You're the one who couldn't let a small accident go without starting an argument." "That argument changed my entire future," Minjun said, looking at her seriously now. Adiz's playful expression softened into something more genuine. "Mine too," she admitted quietly. They sat together in comfortable silence after that, two people whose lives had been completely rewritten by something as small and unplanned as a single argument over spilled coffee, a notebook left behind, and the courage to chase something uncertain instead of something merely safe. Minjun finally understood something he had spent years avoiding. Life rarely changes through grand, dramatic moments planned out in advance. More often, it changes through small, unexpected collisions, conversations no one saw coming, arguments that seem insignificant in the moment but quietly rearrange the entire trajectory of a life. He thought about his old self, the version who measured success through promotions and predictability, who believed safety was the same thing as happiness. That version of him would never have imagined sitting here, in a space he built himself, beside someone who had challenged him to become more than he ever planned to be. If there was one thing Minjun wanted others to understand from everything he had been through, it was this: the moments that scare you the most, the unplanned arguments, the unexpected detours, the conversations that knock you off balance, are sometimes exactly the moments meant to set your life on its truest course. Sometimes, the universe doesn't ask permission before changing your future. Sometimes, it simply spills the coffee, starts the argument, and waits to see what you'll do next. If this story moved you even a little, take a moment to like this video, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe if you haven't already, because more stories like this one are coming. Stories about ordinary people whose lives changed in the most unexpected ways. And if you're going through your own unplanned argument right now, your own unexpected detour that feels more like a disaster than a blessing, remember Minjun's story. Sometimes, the very thing that disrupts your plans is the very thing meant to save your future. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next story.